In a society that worships noise, Friedrich Nietzsche discovered that true power doesn't lie in shouting your truths to the world, but in keeping silent about them. He knew that whoever masters silence masters their own existence, and today you're about to discover why. We live in a world where every thought needs to be turned into a post, every emotion into a story, every opinion into a public debate. We're bombarded by the belief that our voice must constantly echo, that our presence must always be felt, that our worth is directly tied to the volume of our discourse. But what if I told you that this compulsive need to speak, to express ourselves, to always be present, is exactly what makes us weak? Nietzsche, during his solitary walks through the Swiss Alps, observed something fascinating. The most majestic mountains were also the most silent ones. They didn't need to announce their greatness, didn't need to compete for attention. Their presence was so powerful that it spoke for itself. And it was in that contemplation that he began to understand a truth that would forever change his philosophy. Silence is not the absence of power. It's the purest form of power. Think for a moment about your last heated argument. Remember that time when you felt a desperate need to prove your point, to make the other person understand your perspective. How much energy did you spend trying to convince someone? How much of your inner peace did you sacrifice in the name of being right? Nietzsche realized that this need for external validation is actually a symptom of deep inner insecurity. When we constantly need to assert who we are, it's because deep down, we still don't know who we really are. The German philosopher wrote in his personal fragments, "What does not kill me makes me stronger." But we rarely talk about the complement to that idea. What I don't need to express makes me invincible. He discovered that there's an abysmal difference between having something to say and needing to say something. The first comes from abundance, the second comes from lack. Look at the people around you. Those who talk non-stop, who always need to have the last word, who turn every conversation into a stage for their own performances. Now look at those who speak little, but when they do speak, everyone stops to listen. Where is the real power? Nietzsche knew the answer, and it led him to one of the most revolutionary discoveries of his philosophy. But before we continue this journey, I need to ask you a question that will shake the very foundations of what you believe about communication and influence. Have you ever considered that your need to be understood might be exactly what prevents others from understanding you? I know what you're thinking right now, but how can I connect with people if I don't speak? How can I build relationships? How can I express myself? How can I be myself? These questions are natural, and I completely understand this resistance. We've all been conditioned to believe that communication equals verbal expression, that intimacy is built through words, that to love is to talk about love. But let me tell you about a moment you've probably experienced. That magical instant when you were with someone special and you didn't need to say anything. Maybe it was a shared sunset, a look exchanged in the midst of chaos, a silent embrace after a difficult day. In those moments, didn't you feel a deeper connection than in 1,000 empty conversations? Wasn't it precisely in the silence that you truly found each other? Nietzsche lived this experience intensely. He spent years of his life in profound isolation, not out of misanthropy, but out of a revolutionary understanding. To truly know humanity, we must first truly know solitude. In his letters to close friends, he described how those periods of absolute silence didn't separate him from the world, but connected him to the purest essence of existence. Think about the anxiety you feel when you're in a group and have nothing to contribute to the conversation. That discomfort, that feeling of invisibility, that compulsion to say anything just to feel present. Nietzsche identified this phenomenon as one of the great symptoms of modernity. We've lost the ability to inhabit silence, and with that, we've lost the ability to inhabit ourselves. How many times have you said yes when you wanted to say no, just to avoid the awkward silence that might follow? How many times have you filled the void of a conversation with unnecessary words just to avoid facing that blank space that could actually reveal much more about you and the other person than 1,000 chosen words? The German philosopher discovered something extraordinary. When we stop trying to impress others with our words, we begin to impress them with our presence. When we stop trying to convince the world of our worth, we begin to embody that worth so authentically that it becomes undeniable. If this idea has already resonated with you, imagine what's coming next. Subscribe so you don't miss this journey of self-discovery that we're just beginning. Now we come to the heart of Nietzsche's secret philosophy, silence as an act of creation. For him, every unnecessary word we speak is a lost opportunity to create something truly meaningful within ourselves. It's as if every compulsive speech were a small leak of our vital energy, leaving us increasingly empty, more dependent on external validation. Imagine your mind as a garden. Every thought you don't need to express is like a seed you allow to germinate in silence. Every opinion you do and feel the need to debate is like a plant that can grow without being constantly trampled by the feet of the curious. Every feeling you do and need to explain to others is like a flower that can bloom in all its beauty without being picked before its time. Nietzsche practiced this radically. During his most creative periods, he would completely withdraw from society, not because he despised people, but because he had discovered that true creation happens in silence. It was in those moments of absolute retreat that he wrote his most powerful works. It was in silence that he found his most authentic voice. But how do you apply this in practical life? How do you use silence as a tool of power without becoming a cold or disconnected person? Nietzsche offers us 3 revolutionary practices. First, the practice of creative containment. Instead of dumping your thoughts on the first available ear, allow them to mature within you. Treat your ideas like precious wines that need time to develop their most complex flavor. You'll discover that a thought kept for a week carries much more weight than 1,000 thoughts shared impulsively. Second, the practice of magnetic presence. When you're in a conversation, instead of worrying about what you'll say next, dedicate yourself completely to listening. Not listening to respond, but listening to understand. Nietzsche discovered that a person who truly listens has much greater influence than someone who speaks brilliantly. Why? Because in a world full of people desperate to be heard, the one who truly listens becomes irresistibly attractive. Third, the practice of expressive non-judgment. Even when you deeply disagree with something, try not expressing that disagreement immediately. Not out of cowardice or passivity, but out of strategic wisdom. Nietzsche realized that when we keep our objections to ourselves, 2 powerful things happen. First, we have time to refine our position and find truly solid arguments. Second, our eventual expression has much more impact because it's preceded by a reputation as a thoughtful person. But there's an even deeper secret that few know about this philosophy of silence. A secret that can completely transform your relationship with power, with influence, and with your own identity. Nietzsche's best-kept secret about silence is this. It's not a manipulation technique or a social strategy. It's actually a gateway to what he called the eternal return of the same. But not the same in a negative sense, but the same in the deepest possible sense. The constant return to our purest essence, to who we are when we don't need to prove anything to anyone. Nietzsche discovered that when we stop spending energy trying to shape others' perception of us, that energy turns inward and begins a process of inner alchemy. We begin to become genuinely interesting, not because we're trying to be interesting, but because we're being authentically ourselves. We begin to exercise real influence, not because we're seeking influence, but because we become people so integral, so centered, so present, that our mere existence inspires others. He realized that modern society created a dangerous illusion, the illusion that we are what we say we are. But the truth is much deeper and more radical. We are what we choose not to say. We are what we keep in silence. We are the empty space between our words where our true essence can finally breathe. This is the most shocking revelation of his entire philosophy. Silence is not absence, it's fullness. It's not emptiness, it's abundance so great it doesn't fit in words. It's not weakness, it's a force so powerful it doesn't need to prove itself. When Nietzsche wrote, "God is dead," many interpreted it as an attack on religiosity. But for those who understood his philosophy of silence, the phrase had a much deeper meaning. The external God died, so the internal God could be born. And that internal God can only be heard in silence. Friedrich Nietzsche left us with one of the most revolutionary lessons in Western philosophy, a lesson that can transform not just how we relate to others, but how we relate to ourselves. In a world that screams, whoever whispers commands. In a society that desperately seeks attention, whoever is self-sufficient has the world at their feet. In an era that confuses noise with relevance, whoever masters silence masters reality itself. True power doesn't lie in convincing others of who you are, but in being so authentically yourself that your presence becomes undeniable. True power doesn't lie in always having an answer, but in asking questions so deep they change the lives of those who hear them. True power doesn't lie in speaking louder, but in whispering truths so profound they echo forever in the soul of those who receive them. If this video touched something deep within you, if these reflections awakened genuine curiosity about your own relationship with silence and power, then you've already begun your transformation journey. Share this message with someone who needs to hear these words. Leave your comment telling how silence has already changed something in your life. And subscribe to this channel to continue exploring the deepest secrets of philosophy applied to modern life. Remember, in a world full of noise, your silence might be the most powerful revolution you can offer, not just to the world, but especially to yourself.